Hey, college wrestling fans, it's JT1Wrestle here. I have got a guest today. If I were to name all of his accolades, it would take up half of the interview. We're talking about a guy that was an Olympian, a guy that was an NCAA national champion, and a guy that is currently the head coach at the University of Chicago. Please welcome Matt Gentry.
Well, thank you for having me. I've followed your posts for such a long time, so it's good to finally be on here.
You know, Matt, during your wrestling career, you competed for Canada, where you won Pan American bronze medals in both 2007 and 2011. I got to ask you, what was it like competing for Canada? How is wrestling treated up north? And, training wise, your coaching, what's the fan base like?
That's a great question, and but I had a great experience competing on the Canadian national team. Graduated Stanford in 2005, made my first Canadian team in the next year, 2006. And then I was on the national team until I retired in 2012. And, they have a little bit more of they don't have a central Olympic training center. And so it's a little bit more of a regionalized model where, you compete for different clubs. And I competed for the Burnaby Mountain Wrestling Club out of British Columbia, outside of Vancouver. And the head coach of the national team resided there, Dave McKay. He was a two-time Olympian. And then the coach at Simon Fraser, which is Simon Fraser University, is NAI back in the day, and now they're Division II program. Justin Abdu, he was a four-time NAI champ and an Olympian, and a very tough international competitor. Those were my coaches. So I had really great coaching. We care a lot about, living the right lifestyle, and those guys definitely, were committed. You have to commit fully in order to, compete at that level, and definitely had that support, from the governing body. And, it takes a lot to train at that level. You're going overseas multiple times a year. We went to training camps multiple times a year, overseas with multiple other countries. And so, those years were just a blessing. And, I kind of have to pinch myself that I experienced that.
When you were in college, you had an extremely successful career at Stanford, three-time Pac-12 finalist, 138 career victories, which still stands to this day. You won an NCAA title your junior year in 2004. Up until that time, between 1967 and 1999, a period of 32 years, the Cardinal only produced 11 All-Americans. Then once you were there and you were the catalyst, you were that, as Bruce Springsteen would say, you were the spark that started the fire. And since your time over the last 21 years, Stanford has produced 23 All-Americans. Talk about what it's like for you knowing that you were the catalyst, you were the spark that started the fire that is now a very successful Stanford wrestling program.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice. There's actually I was just in Fargo doing some recruiting for the University of Chicago, and some of the coaches we were just talking. I was just talking to them about some of their recruiting strategies. They talked about being first, being the best, or being different. How do you stand out? And those are the three ways to stand out. So being the first national champ, it feels good, but it's not. It's not the reason I did it, right?
Right.
Like, the reason I wanted to see how good I could be. And, those accolades are nice. But again, it's just, I think that, if it wasn't that, I would still be the same person I am today. And so, but yeah, Stanford, I think, was primed to have some success. It's the home of champions. It has more, they win the Directors Cup pretty much every year, which is the point system given out to the best overall athletic department. They've got more team national championships than any other university in the country. And so I was surrounded by excellence, and I was just too naive or ignorant to really not believe that it was possible. And so a lot of things that I couldn't control went right, and I did a really great job controlling the controllables in that season, and wrestling freely, and so having that success. But you said very successful career. It's just human nature. It wasn't as successful as I wanted it to be. I was an undefeated national champ as a junior, and I talk a lot about this when I teach in any clinics. Is I get introduced the way you introduced me, and the reality is the next year, as my senior year, defending champ, I didn't even place. And so I had a lot of setbacks and defeat in my career, which, the wins nor the losses were very defining. And so I think that allowed me to continue to grow as a wrestler. And so that's kind of a message that, I want young people to understand, or, coaches, that, it's easy to focus on the results, but, the type of person you are, it doesn't really change based on results. So,
I'm going to throw another question at you real quick here because you brought up, you finished round of 12 as a senior. And I was there. I watched that match. You lost a really tough one to Matt Levy from West Virginia. I think he got you on an escape. I think it was a 2-1 tiebreaker decision, if memory serves me correct. Do you feel, that the tiebreaker rules have changed so much over the years? Do you feel that they have changed in a way to benefit wrestlers now versus how they were back in 2005?
yeah, I like you know, I like the system the way it is right now. It gives the wrestlers a lot of opportunity to take the 2 minute overtime, to take it into their own hands to score, and then riding time is a differential, and then for the next set of 30 seconds. But they both athletes will have the opportunity. So you like to do an unlimited time is probably not realistic or safe or healthy for the athletes. And so I like it. We talked a lot about adding an over. We just watched freestyle all week at Fargo, and there was a lot of chatter. There always is about adding overtime for athletes there. So, but yeah, to answer the short answer is yes. I think it's good.
I'm going to switch gears on you here a second. Going from your wrestling career into now coaching, you had your first year at the University of Chicago, a very successful one. We're talking 6 regional place winners. 3 of those 6 ended up being NCAA Division III qualifiers. And you had Sean Conway, I would call him a dark horse, a very big surprise, making the NCAA Division III finals. Talk about the success of not only Conway, but of Maroon Wrestling last season.
It was a great, we did have a good year. So we knocked off in dual meets, we knocked off a couple ranked teams. And then I think that competitively we competed pretty hard. So I was pretty happy about how our team progressed in terms of how hard we competed, if that makes sense. And then, getting 3 guys to the national tournament, there's, again, I think we were set up for success. The regions realigned. They added a 7th regional. That was big for Division III, with 125 schools, and I think 6 more getting added this next season. So, getting the extra qualifiers was good. And then Coach Coker had set us up for success in terms of the culture in the room. And so I think that adding Jason Serchis to the staff, NCAA champ in his own right from Northwestern, and Arizona State, but he understands the academics and the athletics, and he's his journey's kind of been like mine in terms of not knowing much about division. We're both Division I guys and didn't know much about Division III until we got into it, and we both love it. And really kind of it's a tough division. Guys there's a lot of good wrestling there. The top wrestling is very high, and so we're very excited to see what our program can do. And then Sean Conway, he's a special kid. He loves wrestling. That's the one thing. Nobody inside of our program who watched him work this year was surprised at his run. Nobody was shocked at that. Because I've been around a lot of really good athletes, and he is as driven as any of them. One of the most focused, um, you know, most focused, driven individuals, and it didn't matter what kind of a day he was having outside of the practice room. When it cut time to practice, he gave it his 100% effort. And we're just trying to have that kind of mindset and mentality spread. So I'm happy with where the program is going for sure. The type of kids that they were recruiting. So
Yeah, I'd like to elaborate a little bit more on Sean Conway. If you look at the entire season, he took a couple of lumps during the year. Was there anything different about his mindset or about his training? Because when he went in there, you said it wasn't a surprise to you or the coaches at the University of Chicago that helped you with your program. But from an outsider perspective, from a fan perspective, him making the finals was like, holy cow! I wasn't expecting him to go all the way to the finals. So was there anything different about like his mindset or anything, or can you talk about that at all?
I mean, he wrestled. He had a smile on his face and was cool, calm, collected, relaxed 10 minutes before his matches. Which is that's a very difficult thing to do. And so, just getting him in that mindset of, to wrestle freely and it's not an easy thing to do. He didn't have any expectations on him. And so that allowed him to perform at a high level. He's very good in certain positions. And when he can get to his positions, then he's going to be successful because he wrestles very hard. He never stops wrestling hard. One of his strengths is that he gets guys really tired. And so, he goes down in matches, and that doesn't really worry the coaching staff. So, so I think that's, he'll have a different challenge this next year because there will be pressure on him, and he's going to have to change his mentality of, the underdog mentality. It won't work. So, but we're excited. We're going to be working with Coit Cooper, who's, a mindset coach out of the West Coast. This year, he's going to be working with our whole team and then individuals as well. And so, it's a new challenge. And, I experienced that, right? Like I was a national champion as a junior, and then my senior year, I don't know that I grew enough to handle the pressure. A lot of that pressure was self-induced, but it's helpful that I've already experienced the the downside of not handling it well. So now can share that, that
I'm
with
gonna
him.
I'm gonna see if I can't make you laugh real quick, Coach. When Coit was wrestling for the University of Indiana, I was still a kid, like a freshman, sophomore in high school, and I'd never seen the name Coit before. So, like when I would talk wrestling and stuff, I always thought his name was Coyote. I always called him Coyote Cooper. And I remember the first time I actually met him, I think I called him Coyote to his face, and he looked at me like I was insane. And it's like, oh, it's pronounced Coit.
Yeah,
So,
well,
kind of fun story there.
next time I talk to him, I'll ask him if he remembers that. That's
Yeah, yeah.
good.
I called him Coyote to his face because that's what I thought his name was.
Well,
Um,
it's super
yeah.
small world. He actually, to All American his senior year, he actually beat my teammate and my roommate, Brad
Really?
Metzler from Stanford. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've known who he is since I was in college and kind of
Oh,
followed his career loosely just because of that.
yeah. Yeah. My next question for you, Coach, is Chicago participated in the Pete Wilson Invitational, which, in my opinion, is the toughest NCAA Division III in-season tournament. You guys did extremely well there. 5 place winners, including putting Darian Estevez in the finals. Now, the question I have concerning Pete Wilson is there's a lot of talk right now in all of college wrestling about moving away from such tournaments and having a larger focus on duels. What is your opinion of having an in-season tournament like Pete Wilson? Is that vital to success?
Yeah, totally. Imagine a system where the only time you wrestle in a tournament is in your regional and nationals. Like those guys wouldn't have been prepared for that type of competition. Dual meet and tournaments are different, and so I do think that that we need tournaments, and especially Division III. One of the the best parts about Division III is that there's a lot of opportunity to wrestle. I tell recruits all the time that if you like competition, we will get you matches no matter where you are in the lineup. Our backups competed, some of our backups had over 30 matches this year, which is incredible. And they got to compete a lot. Now they were winning to get, some of our backups that weren't winning didn't get as many, but, like those opportunities to compete, I think are very important for the sport. What are we doing this for? It is to compete and get better. So I think that tournaments in particular are important. I think providing opportunities for the entire team to compete is important. Now the Pete Wilson, it's funny you mention it because that is a elite level tournament. You enter 10 guys, you're limited to 10 guys. And this year we actually sent less athletes. I think we forfeited one or maybe even two weight classes. I know I think we only had 6 of our starters attend. So we had, less of our horsepower there. And then we had more place winners and scored more points and actually had a worse team finish than we had in years past. So I've only been there. I've been part of the program for 3 years. I was 2 years an assistant under Leo Coker, who's a legend. And then this is my first year as a head coach. So the 3 years I've been tracking the program, we actually scored the most team points and had the worst finish, which was, kind of a testament to the rest of the field. But that did, relative to past performances, it would have been easy to hang our head. But the reality was, if you looked at it, we did awesome at that tournament, and very pleased with the effort from our team. So context.
Chicago is in a very unique conference, the University Athletic Association, which is known for its extremely strong academic presence, and its emphasis is on academic achievement. You have nearby Missouri schools, but also in the UAA is also New York schools, Georgia schools. It's a weird conference in the fact that it's kind of really spread out.
Yeah.
What's it like being a part of such a conference?
There's a lot of pride in the UAA. The UAA championships, only 3 schools out of the 8 sponsor wrestling. And there's some chatter about trying to get, among the coaching staffs to get a 4th added. But we're all research-based institutions. Like you said, we're one of the only D3 conferences not regionally located, right? Most of them are just, all the Wisconsin schools all together, all the, SUNY New York schools are all together, but we're not. And yeah, research-based and academics, I call it the Ivy League of D3. And so I actually really enjoy, I like that there's actually less schools because our travel is a little bit less and we get to build our schedule. We're not confined to our schedule of having to travel to all these, in some cases far places, so we get to build our schedule that's going to best suit our team. And there's so much good wrestling in the Midwest, especially at the D3 level, that, we're able to, I think, really build a great schedule. And then, we circle the calendar for that UAA championships. It's a lot of fun. Every year it comes down. It's every year there is some upsets, some good wrestling. And, my first year part of it, I was just shocked because it's small, but the intensity is very high. And it's a lot of fun to be a part of, quite honestly.
You were speaking about trying to get another one of the schools in the UAA to add men and women's wrestling, which I would love to see. It's really funny you mentioned that because we have an episode actually in the order that this will be posted. The next day's interview is going to be me and another guy talking about NCAA Division III teams that don't have wrestling that we would like to see wrestling at. And I'm going to give away a little bit more than I should right now because we always like those to be surprises. But one of my picks was Washington University in St. Louis, Missouri. I'm sure you probably have your own opinion, but man, I would love to see wrestling there at Washington.
Yeah. Well, the challenge is that most Division III schools are enrollment-driven institutions, and the UAA schools are not. And
Yeah.
so, that's just that's a hurdle that Mike Moyer, NWCA, they're really good at overcoming hurdles and adding programs. So I think, hopefully there's a path, or maybe there's some interest, but it's going to take some work and creativity for sure.
And that leads me to another question here, Coach. Is at a UAA school, we are talking about academics. Um, what does it mean for you as a coach? Because you guys are also not only producing NCAA qualifiers and NCAA All Americans, you're also producing NWCA Scholar All Americans. What does that mean to you as a coach?
It goes back to our purpose and our mission. Our team, what is why are people wrestling? We talk about that inside of our program, and what are we doing this for? And ultimately we try, and I think Division III does a really good job of keeping wrestling in its proper perspective, and that these guys are just at Fargo, one of the D3 coaches came up to me and it's like, "Oh, good to see another D3 guy, even if you're a D1 guy." And I'm like, I'm a D3 guy. I love Division III model. The student, it really does emphasize the student part of student athlete, but that's very important. And the way I talk about it is, we try and maximize both your athletics and academics. If your goal is to be the best athlete you can be, Division III wrestling is tough enough that most athletes are going to be pushed in competition to develop and become their best wrestler, right? Like, Bo Bassett, Jack Forrest, obviously not. But, we provide a great experience that also emphasizes the student aspect of their education. And especially my guys, they're going on to massive amounts of professional and personal success in life. And so, it's gratifying as a coach to see these guys, they care a lot about wrestling. They work really hard. They want to win. I'm a very competitive person. I want to win. That's our goal as a program, is to, continue to climb the ranks and see how high we can go and hopefully win a national title as a team. Put multiple guys on the podium every year. And then also, like, this year, 100% with the spring GPAs just came out, 100% of our team has above a 3.0. Our team GPA 3.7 in the term. So 3.0 cumulative. The average of our term GPA was a 3.7. We had 10 guys with a 3.9 or 4.0. And that's at a very rigorous institution that, it doesn't have as much grade inflation. It's hard. I tell people all the time, it's the perfect school for a wrestler mentality, because wrestling's a hard sport, and that when you get pushed in practice or with partners or with good coaching or hard tournaments, that's what makes you grow and become a better version of yourself as a wrestler. And it's the same in academics. When you get forced to uncomfortable situations, then you're gonna grow. The difference is that it's almost a guarantee to be rewarded. I worked really hard my senior year, and it didn't happen. I didn't even place at the national tournament, and I probably worked harder that year because I knew it was going to be harder. I didn't handle it; was a little bit mental there, but I didn't get the reward even though I put in the work. And in the academic side of things, we have a 97% institutional graduation rate, 100% job placement rate inside of our program, the years that I've been tracking. And so our guys, you're going to get rewarded for the work you do, and it's going to, lead to dollars and, hopefully then also personal growth. That's important too. So,
Coach, my last question for you today is you are located in the third largest city in the United States. Has there been an adjustment there for you? And, talk about, the city of Chicago, because that's also a huge attraction for why someone would want to go to the University of Chicago is Chicago in itself. Talk about the city and using that as a utility to help recruit.
Yeah, I mean, we're a short train ride away from downtown. You know, you can see in, I don't, the background will probably show up for those that are watching this, not seeing it, but we're an urban campus, right? Chicago, but we're also very spread out. You know, we're not a lot of vertical, right? Like it's a super spread out, very green campus, lots of open space, and so it's gorgeous. You know, I enjoy giving the campus tours because it kind of reminds me that it is a beautiful setting. You kind of get used to it when you walk around it every day. And but for me personally, I've actually been living in the Chicagoland area for almost 15 years. My wife is from here. I first moved back to Chicagoland to train at a club overtime with Sean Bormet and Jake Herbert, Mike Poeta were we were training there. Andrew Howe, Josh Torella. There was a lot of really good wrestlers training there. And then my wife is from here, so I've been living in this area for a long time. But absolutely love that it's an attractive city with just a lot of options of things to do.
Well, Coach, I want to thank you for being a part of JT1 Wrestle today. It's been an honor and a privilege having you on, and we wish you the best of success in 2025, 2026.
Yeah, thank you. It's I appreciate you kind of shining some spotlight. You know, so many kids think D1 or bust, and there's just so many great options at the non D1, D2, NAI levels as well. And so I think kids opening their eyes to they can have great experiences and great competitive experiences, and it doesn't have to be D1. It's really important for the sport. So thank you.